Koto, welcome everyone to the first ever episode of Full Credit. We're very excited to be here. My voice, of course, is that of Alice Soper, who right now, if you are looking at the video, is the whitest woman in women's rugby. I look like a ghost, but that's okay. I'm here to haunt for, I don't know, positive things. Where am I going with this? Anyway, I'm going to throw it to you. Who have I got here with me?
Kia ora, everyone. Yes, thank you for the handover, white Alice Soper. I feel like I'm red as a beetroot. So, hey, look, we're here now and we're so excited. My name is Les Alder. Just absolutely excited to be here with you, Alice, and just can't wait to dive into some of the content that we're going to share with everyone that we know will love to hear it.
Honestly, we've been threatening to do this for a while, let's be honest, Les. You and I going back and forth in the DMs. I think it was 4 o'clock on Saturday. We're like, should we just record now? Stuff Tim. Let's get on the microphone now. We've got so many opinions to share. I think the trouble for us with all of this is going to be trying to keep ourselves on topic and brief. Not our strong points.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, if you were to go back through our DMs over the years... you could just make content. If there was some kind of content for DMs, there would be some episodes in there. But that's where this all come from, right? It was just two passionate women dropping into each other's DMs, picking each other's brains, sharing content, venting, getting intel of each other, and just enjoying women's rugby, which we're both so passionate about.
100%. And this was the thing, right? It's been so mean already, just before we've even put an episode out, seeing all the love and all the support that we've had through from people. And I think it just goes to show, like I was saying to you the other day, it's the hugely humbling to receive that type of love and respect from people, but also incredibly validating, because we've known, we've been waiting. You and I had both been waiting for this to exist. And as I say to people on the rugby field, if you have time to ask who, the answer is you. And so that's why we're here.
100%. And I mean, I think people might ask why, why have we got this done? And I kind of sit there and I think, why has it taken this long?
Yeah.
And you're right. We've both been sitting there, probably both had a feeling within our own minds, thinking, oh, I'd love to dabble in that space. I'd love to kickstart that, but just needed maybe each other as well to give each other that confidence to do it. And I mean, when you first asked me, I was kind of like, this is the time. I've been sitting on it for a number of years now, never really put pen to paper. And so when you reached out, I was like, yeah, this is it. Let's go.
That's it. And so this first little bit, we're going to spend our time looking at Super Rugby Aupiki, right? And that's the place that we'll kick off. And if you like us, we'll stick around. We'll talk more rugby for you, because to be honest with you, Les and I never run out of things to say. But we're gonna start obviously with Super Rugby, and I thought I'd do a little bit of scene setting so people understand what the heck that is. Because while there'll be people that'll be tuning into this that are diehard fanatics like we are, there will also maybe be people that are trying to find their way into this. So we're gonna try and hold the door open to welcome those that have just joined the party, and then also have something obviously for us that have been having a couple of drinks already. So. What is Super Rugby? Rugby Aupiki, when did it come? Honestly, it was something that was dreamed about forever. I can't even tell you when the first time, probably since 1996, which was when the men's launched. People had been saying, when is a women's version of this going to come along? And I'd say it was probably I don't know about you, Les, but I feel like it was from about 2019, well, after the 2017 World Cup, that drum started to be beating a little bit louder and louder. And then, of course, we finally got to have the exhibition match that was played all the way back in May of 2021. And that was one that was played between your team, the Chiefs Manawa, and Blues. And they actually had a trophy that was made special just for that they still play for now. But you were obviously a part of all of that. Do you want to talk me through how that felt as a player?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, there'd been all that momentum created from the 2017 World Cup and a lot of noise made. And I think we went semi-professional at the top level at the Black Ferns. And questions were being asked around how we continue to provide a high-performance platform for our top tier players. And so when that opportunity came out, and we really probably do need to delve into who were the main drivers behind that, behind the scenes, making that happen. But to have the Blues and the Chiefs come on board, put together two teams in what would have been 5 or 6 weeks, I do believe, approximately. And girls were training in a centralised location. So for us at the Chiefs, it was in Cambridge, and we had players from all over our Chiefs region travelling to Cambridge, and we were doing the night sessions, and we would have trained maybe 5 or 6 times leading up to that match. But the girls were just so keen for it, and we also knew that if we done it well and we put on a decent display of rugby, that maybe it would be the catalyst for something greater. And given we were only, 5 or 6 trainings allowed to before we went into that competition, I thought the product on the night, I think when we look at it now, it's like, oh gosh, that's some rough rugby. But on the night, the occasion, the atmosphere leading into it, the build up around it was so exciting, and it did enough to, kickstart some conversations.
I mean, 2 things there. One, how ridiculous is this always? It's always laying on the shoulders of those women to make the case. Like, it's Megan Rapinoe who has the great quote that says that, men in sport are invested on their potential and women in sport are invested on their past performance. So we actually had to do the thing before anybody could say, oh, they can actually do the thing, which is maddening. And it's also like us on this podcast right now. But like the other thing that was interesting at that time, Liz, I remember you in the press conference after. You made those comments quite pointed for you, because you were a pretty good girl for New Zealand rugby, quite pointed for you, saying, imagine what we could do with more resources. And at the time, I remember, clipped that up against Helen Munn, who was the first Black Fern captain, and our first test back in, 1989, when they played the Pacific Coast Grizzlies. And she was interviewed after that match and said basically the same thing. So these games were 30 plus years apart, and the women were saying the same thing. Imagine what we could do if we were just a little bit better resourced. And it was just these echoes across time talking to each other, right?
Yeah, I remember that. I mean, I think, yes, you're right. I was a good girl for New Zealand rugby in the camera. I think there was a few headaches I did create in the background, but hey, there was still opportunities, right? As a captain, you get a platform to voice certain things when you get in front of media and things like that. So there was an opportunity then to sort of say, like, invest in this. We can make this an even better product if you just give us your belief and then back that up with a bit of resource. So, what are we now? 2025. We're going into our, fourth season of Super Rugby Aupiki. It's developing into a longer competition, which I'm no doubt we're going to pick apart over the coming weeks, but it's come a long way, and it's got a long way to go still.
Yeah. I think we can just take it as read, people that are listening. We are fans of a crossover with Super W, an introduction of at least a Panina Pacifica team, and that we would like this to be probably twice as long as it is right now. So we can just put that out of the way. Agree. We all want more rugby to talk about. But the first year, so we had that exhibition match, then we had the first year, and let's be honest, COVID completely ruined that. Like, we went from what was supposed to be, a month-long tournament to 10 days. There were only 5 games played in 10 days. The amount of anxious mum DMs. Hey, just saying. Rugby mums, I love it when you send me DMs, but I got so many anxious mum DMs during that first year because there was so much, like, COVID was ripping through camp. People were being pulled in last minute. People were getting off the seatbed and getting onto the rugby field. There was a lot of stuff that was going on really, really quickly to try and make it happen because we'd waited for so long. We needed it to happen. That five games, but hey, at the end of it, who was the champion?
We were. And look, yeah, it was a real interesting time. And I kind of reflect back on that competition and I think to myself, were we the champions because we were the best team? Or were we the champions because we survived COVID the best? Like there were just so many different things at play at that time. But it was really interesting. We were centralised in Taupō in our own bubbles, obviously everyday rat testing. And then we'd travel to, I think we had a couple of games in Owen Delaney Park in Taupō. And then for the final, we travelled to Hamilton in our buses. It was really interesting times. And we were probably lucky because the competition itself had no build-in. Like there was very limited opportunity for a pre-season or any kind of camps and things like that, given it was COVID. we were lucky that we had a lot of sevens players come into our environment who were fully professional. So that just bolstered what a lot of teams probably didn't have. We had these core group of girls that were fully professional. So we were pretty stacked, that Chiefs Manawa team of 2022.
Let's be honest, that Manawa magnetism hasn't gone anywhere. You still seem to be like consistently have some of the most high profile players in the team in the competition. There's consistently like obviously a draw card because you have to say the environment seems to be really set up to receive. And I would say, whereas other franchises maybe took a little bit of time to find their feet, I think we're a lot better this year than we have been in previous. I think straight out the gate, you could see that Chiefs commitment was slightly different. And you saw that as well in the way that you were able to kind of come together and hold together during that chaos of that first season. But I do want to say too, Les, that first season created my favourite Aupiki fact, which is when we created what I call the Aupiki anomaly, which is when, from this moment forward, and we hope it continues this year if you're from the Hurricanes region, the person that comes last one year wins the next year. Because in that first season, it was Matatu who didn't get a win, I don't believe, in that first season, not in the main season, and then came back and stole that game. Oh my God, what a thriller. What was it, 33-31 on Manawa's home turf? An epic game, and that was year two. Like, unreal.
And then didn't that year the Blues also
Yep.
finish last?
Yes.
To the Poua.
Yes.
They played that game. And
then they came first last year, which means great news if you're a Hurricanes Poua fan, because where did we finish last? Last year? We were last, which means this year we're on top, baby. Statistics tell you this, not just me as a one-eyed Hurricanes Poua supporter. It's the stats back it up, okay?
So if they win it this year, every team has won it. There's been a different winner every year. If they don't, someone has won it for the first time twice.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of milestones coming towards the end of this season.
And the other thing that's going to be interesting to watch in terms of the overall season is, will Manawa make the final? Because they have every year. So while there's been a different winner all the time, Manawa has been the consistent other team that's played in that final. And will they back it up again? Will we have the anomaly hold, and will we have Manawa still there? Because the stats should tell you that it will be a Hurricanes Poua Manawa final, but I think the Blues and the Matatu will have quite a bit to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this is probably one of the most exciting years that we're about to head into, and it always is when it's a World Cup year, right? But I feel like for the first time in this competition, in the history of this competition, we've actually got 4 teams that are quite evenly balanced. I mean, the Blues, let's be honest, they are pretty stacked. They've got a phenomenal team that really exciting across the whole 23. But I do feel like where other teams have had massive gaps, they've now filled those. And so those gaps are closing between teams. So I do think this is going to be our best one yet, 100%.
Now, you've set me up beautifully there, because I did want to talk about the Blues first. We want to dive into each of them. And what I can tell you is that there has been a 70% retention rate for the Blues this year. So I've been tracking this as the tournament has going on. I love me a spreadsheet. I am been waiting for someone to invite me on a podcast, so I just created my own so I can tell you about my stats. So 70% retention rate. And what does that mean? That means that there's been like a 30% churn in that squad. So for the most part, most of these players were involved in that championship team last year. And that's like a pretty high. I think that might be the highest rate across the competition this year to be able to hold on to that. You can also look at just over half of their named squad. So these were looking at the original announcements. I will just put the asterisks on that because there has been changes already. Oh, this tournament loves to change things up. Anyway, just over half of that original announced tournament were Black Ferns capped, so they had represented New Zealand at some point in their career. And what's also interesting is that there is a core of 9 players within that squad that have turned up for the Blues for 4 years now. So not only have they got that, they've got that spine, I think, to keep them in line too. All of those things, when we're talking about tournaments that are run at a sprint, yeah, we're longer now, but it's still only 6 weeks. Having that continuity of personnel who know what the Blues environment is, having that cute continuity of like core players within a squad, that's got to help, right?
100%. And look, I just want to sort of side note here. This is why I wanted a team with this lady, because she loves a spreadsheet and she's got facts written down on those spreadsheets from years and years back. So when you're spitting out facts like that, I mean, how can you not want to listen to this woman speak? But yeah, when you 30%, like that's pretty good. And I would say too that this team has been chipping away at their identity. They've been chipping away at their off-field identity. Who are they? What do they bring? What do they celebrate? What makes them unique? And that's been happening at the same time on field. I would say that this team, and I'm probably going to jump ahead here, but this team has really started to nail down their on-field identity as their off-field identity has got stronger and stronger as well.
So if somebody's never watched the Blues play before, how would you describe that style of play?
I would say now, well, maybe let's go with historically. I think that they were big physical team, but probably lacked in lasting the full 80. And them and Poua alike were probably pretty similar like that. Had some phenomenal players in small silos across their team. And we're very big on the risk versus reward game plan. I think in 2023, they went with a real strong, let's pay at high risk and hope that the reward pays off. And it probably didn't. But they persevered with that game plan. And I'd say last year, especially towards the second half of Super Rugby Aupiki, that game plan really started to click. And they really started to look comfortable with that risk versus reward. So I'd say now, how I'd describe them is big, physical, and balanced. And balanced probably isn't a very cool word, but what I mean by that is this is a team that's got firepower now from 1 to 15, no doubt. Historically, probably hasn't had the best bench, but now they've got one hell of a bench. So 1 to 23, they're strong. And that's what I mean by balanced.
It's going to be interesting with that, right? Because I think you're right, like in terms of the way that they started to be able to grind out last year. And I'd say a real key to unlocking that was when they would bring Kalia Awa off the bench for the last 20. She was a real, like, Mel Puckett did a great job, steering, getting them into position in that first 60. But it was Kalia Awa coming off the bench, having such a big impact that she ended up getting a Black Ferns contract off it. Like, unreal, for 20 minutes a week. Like, that's how good this kid was. But she obviously will be probably looking at being their start this year because Mel's having a baby, I believe. Congratulations. So she's not in squad. And so Kalia, obviously, opportunities there. Do you think she'll be making a big play? Got the contract, but surely she'll want some caps attached to that, right?
Absolutely. Big minutes too in a crucial year for her. She's got some strong opposition in Iritana Hohaia and Maya Joseph at that top level. So if she's, wanting to push for higher honours later in the year, then she needs big minutes to cement how she wants to play as a 9. And I think, like you said, she done enough in 20 minutes per game to get a Black Ferns contract last year, but we probably haven't seen her play so much rugby since then. So I'd love to see her clock up some big minutes, get some combinations going with Kristen Cottrell or even Ruahei Demant, however they team that sort of halves combination. But she's going to be an exciting player to watch, and I really hope that this is a bang, like really blows the lid off this season for Kalia.
Yeah. Is there anyone else that you're kind of looking at when they've had a bit of ins and outs, and I can share the graphic on our social media pages that I made a wee while about all those that have come and gone. But is there anyone that kind of stood out to you from that list, like big gets that you think might mix things up for them?
I think one area, maybe it's because I'm so biased towards Lucy's and that's always an area that I pay attention to, but I don't think over the years the Blues have had a out and out genuine 7. And so for them to pick up someone like Holly Renaway, who's a genuine 7 and a quality one at that, I think that's just going to add to an already ferocious loose trio. So I'm excited to see how she fits into this fold, and her other mate from Matatu, Atlanta Lolo here. I think this style of rugby is really going to suit her as a rugby player. So we know that there's the Portia Woodmans, the Caitlin Vahakolos, Jamie Colosi even, all those girls out in the back line. But I'm quite excited to see the Atlanta Loloheres and Holly Rack-Renway in this new team.
This podcast brought to you by two forwards. Suck it, backs. You guys are always commentating everything, so I'm stoked that we finally have two forwards talking about it, and we can actually tell you what's going on in a scrum because I love them. And so, of course, if you're going to talk about Atlanta, I have to talk about Awhina as well. Tangenway Noho, who's come up the road from Manawa, but also come back. She's had a long time out. She's hungry as. She had a terrible injury in the pre-season, which opened the door for the Kate Henwood fairy tale. And so now Awhina, she's looking fit. I saw her in the preseason against the Tars. She's looking hungry for it. I'm really excited to see her get another crack because she came out of nowhere. One cap wonder to make it into that Rugby World Cup squad last time. So she's ready, to do some more.
Yeah, like as a Manawa, OG, I guess, and Awhina was one as well. She was in the original 2021. She actually came into that team, got pulled in, I think, quite last minute, maybe 6 months after having her baby, her little boy. So it was quite saddening to see her go up to the Blues, but understandable at the same time. She's returning after, like you said, long-standing injury. And I'd say for some, and I mentioned this on my socials a little while ago, it's a big decision. I think it would have been a big decision for a lot of those props to have decided whether they stuck with Manawa or whether they went elsewhere, because Manawa, let's be honest, were spoilt for choice when it came to front rowers. And being a World Cup year and this competition only being 6 weeks long, you need game time. You need to be seen. So I think she made a great decision. And I also think the Blues made a great decision in approaching her.
For sure. All right. Should we head down the road? Should we look at Manawa?
It only makes sense.
Should we have a look? Okay, so I'll rattle off those stats for you again at the top with this lot. So slightly lower retention rate, only just. So 67%, which honestly for Manawa is quite high for them. Probably the highest it's ever been because they're usually about 50% turnover. So this year is actually they're sticking around more than the Manawa usually do. They've still managed to pinch a couple of people from other franchises, but anyway, sticking around, but also a lot of Black Ferns in there. 63% of their side is capped at some point for New Zealand, so good thing. But that churn rate is interesting because that's what's led to only 5 of these players having stuck around for all 4 seasons, which is so interesting, right? But then, you add on top of that, you got a boomerang from way back because Kelly Brazier's come ricocheting back from season 1. We haven't seen her in Super for a while, and then, kia ora, Kelly, good to see you here.
Yeah, I mean, those are interesting stats. I'm learning here on this podcast with our audience, hopefully. Yeah, I mean, that's interesting for me. I do think to myself, because I'm very much a believer of grow your own. You've got to grow that depth from within your own provinces. And I think that is what Auckland has done really well over the years. And I hope that is also the case for some of these other provinces. Matatu are very big on growing their own. I do sort of, when you yell out those stats, I think to myself, the same could probably be said about the coaching group for Manawa. It's been a new coaching group nearly every year. So when you're trying to sort of make your identity and your style of play, when you're trying to lay that down and really cement that in the ground, that changes when you change your coaching staff and when you change your player group, right? So yeah, that's quite an interesting thing, and I wonder what impact that's had on their style of play. But like you said, they've always been sport for choice in terms of having black fern caps, so experienced players. They've definitely gone with a few more experienced team selections this year, and you mentioned one of those being Kelly Brazier. So it'll be interesting to see if that experience plays a role in this competition. And I think me and you, I hope you don't mind me saying this, I'm sort of stealing this out of our DMs. We sort of spoke about that experience is crucial when you're playing the long game, when you're playing the mental game, right? Is it as crucial in a 6-week competition? What do you reckon?
Well, because it's the thing, right? just going to be honest, because because I'm about Kelly's age. She's in much better condition than me. But I can tell you the old piece of chewing gum I became after 30, and that you really had to chew me quite a long time to get me in any type of like warmth to be able to do like, it just took me longer to recover. You know, if we'd had a big game, you know, I never got to play at the super level, but if we had played a big game at the, you know, provincial level, if say we played Auckland in the weekend, I probably wasn't feeling great in terms of training until maybe Wednesday, Thursday after that weekend. Just took the attrition on the body. And so when you're looking at that in terms of the intensity of this and the fact that this is again with the 6 week, a niggle can knock you out. You know, let's be honest, on the scale of a, you know, grade of injury, generally, what is it, 4 to 6 weeks is a low grade? That's a whole tournament when we're talking about Super Rugby Aupiki. So there's a couple of things that happen with that. I think one, people have a tendency to hide injuries, which I don't love. I think our experienced players are probably better at putting their hands up because they're, you know, they know it's not worth playing that game. It's not worth playing that game, young players. Please don't do that. But the other part is like, you know, you're able to bounce back a little bit quicker when you're younger. And that's just the reality of it, my friends.
So then it probably poses a certain challenge, right, to that coaching group around how they manage that, you know, so that they're getting the best out of their players. Because I was the same, like towards the end of my career, my Achilles just gave me hell and I had it to be managed. And while mentally I wanted to still run every single kilometre and metre that was put out in front of us, realistically, to sort of get the best out of my body, I had to be managed. So yeah, is that something that they have to factor in as a team? Will it pay dividends because it nurtures those new ones coming through and it boosts their confidence, having those experience skills around them? There's pros and cons to it, I guess. And yeah, we're going to see that all unfold. But quite interesting to see the result from their preseason against the Blues. While we're talking about these two teams, they did have a preseason game on Friday in Hamilton. And yeah, like preseasons, anything happens in preseasons. You don't really know what a team is trying to achieve, if they're trying to just get girls game time, if they're trying to test combinations. We don't know if there's niggles in the camp and if they're unavailable players. So there could have been that happening for Chiefs Manawa on the weekend, but to go down 66-12 in a preseason game, 1 week out before the competition kicks off, it was a bit of a surprise for me.
I mean, but also, isn't that just an endorsement of the experience? Because from what I understand, the Manawa started with a potentially greener, you know, first half team. And if you look at the 2 half scores, yeah, okay, first half, 45-0. Second half, what's that, 20-something to 12? So we're looking in closer distance there. And is that the impact that experience can bring you? And I think that's probably going to be the thing, right? Like when it comes to those like crucial minutes, game minutes, who do you want? I want someone that's been there before. I love you young ones, but I don't trust you yet.
Not yet. She's saying yet.
Yeah. You might blow my mind. I'm always amazed by how.
See, I'm like the opposite. I'm like, young ones, ignore what she just said and just go out there, be fearless, back yourself.
No, I think you're probably right. Like, it's the whole thing of like they run like they've never been hurt. Like there is something around the naivety of like having not known like the worst outcome yet, that also can give you a confidence. There is definitely a gift that is in experience as well.
100%. I think when we look, and I mean that game on Friday wasn't televised, so we had little spies at the game giving us some intel. But yeah, like you said, it was a more inexperienced team. It looked like they were playing with different combinations. So take what you want from it. It might not be nothing to them, you know, they may have expected something like that and it hasn't fazed them one bit. In comparison, did the Blues play a pretty strong team? What room for growth have they still got to untap? Because you could probably say for Manawa, there's a whole lot of opportunity there to unravel, given we haven't actually seen their top side.
Yeah, and that's a great point as well, in that the Blues already had that game. They had that game against the New South Wales Waratahs, who were over, and they had the second preseason, and so did the Hurricanes Poua. So is it any wonder maybe that they shaped up better, or that they played maybe closer to what their starting line is in those preseasons? Now, the question of why it is that two franchises played two and the other didn't, I understand that might be budget stuff. Because from what I understand, there is only accommodations made for one pre-season. And that's just another question about resources, please.
And that probably takes us back to that comment of the 2021 inaugural game, right? Like it still sits there. It's still a question that has to be asked is imagine what these girls could achieve with the resource. If they didn't have these barriers that restricted their ability to play rugby and to grow as players and teams, we all know that you get better with game time. We've seen it happen time and time again. So, it's really disappointing to see that they only got one preseason game. I'd imagine their coaches had to be creative in terms of creating internal games within themselves to fit within budget. But I don't know, will it be the difference, are those two teams that got two preseason games, are they now a week ahead?
They're playing each other though, Liz. So that's the thing. In round one, they play each other, so it's all out the window.
Yeah.
I'm going to now, though, look at me. Here's my Poua hat. It doesn't fit on top of my headphones, but that's right. I'm putting my Poua hat on because, look, I'm never going to pretend to you people that I'm not an out-and-out fan of the Hurricanes Poua, okay? I played all my rugby in New Zealand out of the Wellington region, and so they are forever having my heart, unfortunately for me, because the Hurricanes Poua are just like the Hurricanes men, and what was that saying years ago? Expect the unexpected. That is my team. And so this season, though, I think we are going to very much do that because people might have all types of... They write us off before we've even begun. Expect the unexpected. I think we can come out of here and do something unreal. Retention rates, though, we're not great at this. I'm not going to pretend like we are. It's been another churn year for the Hurricanes Poua. In our defence, a number of mums. We've had a number of people become hapu since last season, and so congratulations to them. We love your babies. We love to see them on the sideline. But 55% retention rate from last year, so quite a big churn for them. What is good, we got more Blackfoots than we had last year, so we've got 38%, so we have the lowest in the competition in terms of capped Black Ferns. That's all right, we just got tomorrow's Black Ferns. We had Hannah King last year and nobody knew who she was. 6 players though. We've had 6 that core that have rolled out season on season. Our hometown heroes, we love you. You know who you are. I know who you are. But that's the thing, right? Hannah King gone. So whatever we had built, we're really good at making people look great when they come to Wellington, I will say that. Like, if you come and play for the Poua, you will look fantastic here. And then Matatu or Manawa or someone, or the Blues will want you, because Kaliawa was originally ours too.
And then they just get snapped up.
But
it's the Poua that turned them into Black Ferns. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying. Come have a jam here. You never know. But I think, like you picked up on that great point with Manawa. It's the same deal here. We've had a new head coach every season, and this season I think we've got it right in terms of for our region. Obviously, Fusi has spent a long time as the head coach at the Manawatu Cyclones. He's now been the more recent coach at the Wellington Pride. Plus EJ Emma Jensen from Hawke's Bay. Between them, they know everybody that's ever played rugby in the lower North Island. So in terms of understanding the rugby of our region, they are awesome to be able to pull the best out of those girls. And I think that's what you're going to see. Because the thing I've seen in the 2 pre-seasons, I have managed to watch them both, is they're leaning into the physicality that we do best. Who needs the edges when you can win up the middle? That's what I saw on Saturday. My goodness. What was an edge? When did we ever use her? We don't know her. We'll just run straight over the top of you in the middle and maybe an offload. Like, that's bringing the physicality, bringing it on attack. But I think really exciting for me is also on defence. Not just shooting up, making a big hit, but being connected. The efficiency of the tackles, that's going to be, I think, a really interesting stat to keep an eye on between last season to this. The tackling I saw on Saturday in that Poua Matatu match, I was like, the efficiency of this tackle now, we're not having to send 2 in, and we are getting them to ground and we're getting up and we're getting over ball. That was both teams. It's gone through the roof. Like, if you want to see the impact that Super Rugby Aupiki has had on women's rugby in Aotearoa, I think that the tackle efficiency has got to be one of them.
Well, you know what they say, right? Like a lot of defensive coaches I've heard say over the years that your defense defines your character. And I would say that the Poua have probably struggled with really showing that dogged character that they are capable of having. Like they've always had some great players in different positions, probably lacked a bit in the front row over the years, tactically, but I think the one thing they were always sort of guilty of was probably just falling short, losing steam around that 60-minute mark, right? And even though you're a loyal Power supporter, I know you probably agree with me on that one. Whereas now, you know, when you're hearing comments like that, that their tackle efficiency, their connection, their desire to get up into the tackle, on all those sorts of things, like that's starting to show to me that the character's building within that team. And when you couple that with a couple of great and probably necessary at this time external imports like the Angel Mulloos and the Natalie Delameres, who have played Black Ferns rugby and are specialist front rowers, that just adds to that gap that was in the front row there. So that's exciting. I'm really excited about this team. And Layla Sayer, I should say, when you talk about that defense defines character, that's the name that comes out for me is Layla Sayer. She's just phenomenal.
She had a tissue hanging out her nose in the what was it? The second third. They played thirds on Saturday for some reason. Anyway, she had a tissue hanging out her nose, and then of course that lasted all of 30 seconds. I don't know what was going on from the bench there. Like, why haven't we put a tape around this? Anyway, it fell out. I saw her look at it, and I was like, is she going to pick that up and put it back in? She looked at it and obviously thought about it for a minute and then just ran away. And I was like, that's the right choice from you. Nobody needed to see that, Layla. But, like, Layla's going to be immense. Iritana, man. She had to do a lot of watching of Maya Joseph from the bench and the Black Ferns last year, and she's only got hungrier for it because she is hissing the form she's in at the moment. Also, Aisha Letiang, she was still out at this point last year. That kid, okay, I took a photo after the game with her calves. I said, can I have a photo with your calves? Because they are my favourite player. And one of them, she's only rebuilt in the last year. It's a baby. It's 1 year old. We should have a birthday cake for it at the next game because they are incredible, and the pace she's moving at. I would love to have put a shot clock on one of the kickoffs. She almost got it, and she covered about 30 metres and, I don't know, like 2 seconds. She was lightning. I've never seen her in this shape. If you're from Wellington, you call Aish baby because she was ours. She was 16 when she first played in the Wellington Pride with us. I have never in my life, this kid has been, you know, a World Cup champion, scored a try in the last World Cup final. Never in my life have I seen her in this shape. It is so exciting.
So you take that then, you think how lethal she's been over all her years. You add a bit of maturity, and I've seen in some clips on the weekend she's leading huddle chat. Like, that's big, that's massive stuff to see her take on those leadership roles. So you add a bit of maturity, and now you add that physical conditioning. I mean, that is a lethal combination, right? I mean, who comes back from an ACL and plays one of their first games at international test level against England and absolutely fire? Like, it just, like, I thought we'd seen some of her best potential, but it's obviously untapped. And I'm so excited to see her play. We will probably unpack what that's going to look like at the higher level because we've got some outstanding wingers just popping out of everywhere at the moment. But yeah, looking at the Poua, you know, you look at her, the combination of Monica and Shakira, you've got Taylor Ferguson. I'm excited to see Taylor Ferguson. I thought she should have been in the Hurricanes last year. Hakiwai, I thought she had a great FPC. I'm excited about the Poua. I think they're the underdogs of the competition, and I hope they just own that and absolutely deliver.
Now, I'm going to make Christina Sue so happy because the name that I am excited about is Sam Taylor. And I understand, Les, that you've been having to hear about Sam Taylor from Sui for bloody ages, and you're like, take your bloody green glasses off. She's like, it's just another Manawatu player, right?
Oh, me and her have had so many conversations about that sort of stuff, and she loves to wear her green glasses every now and
Yeah.
then. You know, anyone from Manawa too is definitely the star of her universe, and I love that. That's how it should be, you know. Um, but yes, she has talked Sam Taylor up for a number of years, and I think I mentioned that to you, and you actually backed that up. So, what
Yeah.
is it about this Sam Taylor that you guys are excited about? What can we expect from her in Opiki this year?
Okay, so you know how you and I were presidents of the Eleanor Plum King fan club last year? You know,
Yes.
you and I, card carrying members, you're the president, I'm the secretary. We were big hype women for her because why? Because she's just went and went and went. And when we're talking about, you know, you're saying that's something that the Poua aren't known for, and she was, that's what Sam Taylor's giving me in the locks for us. And so that means now when I'm looking at my back row, I've got 3 grinders because I've got Layla, I've got Kahurangi Sturmy, and I've got Eleanor Plum King. Plus now I've got that grind in that second row too, like I've got an extra person to be grinding. We've got other, you know, we're now playing that more typical kind of lock combo, where
Mm.
previously we had our twin towers, which were, you know, Jackie Patia Fariti and Jonah Ngangwu, who, let's be honest, player profile-wise, quite similar players. So they're both big ball carriers, can change the play, make a great break. And I'm not going to say that either of them weren't a good ticker because they were, but we've now got that more traditional kind of lighter weight, big ticker, run all day. And that's what Sam Taylor's done. Her, in both pre-seasons I've watched, her tackle rate off the ground, back in the line, tackle, back-to-back tackles, like she's everywhere. She's been everywhere. You know, she's a hard case if you've ever had a conversation with her. She's still everywhere because she's not necessarily having the conversation that you're having at the time, but she is going at a rate of knots on the field, and I'm excited about it.
That's cool. And is she a predominant lock or lock
Yeah,
Lucy?
lock. Yeah. So that's where it's that whole thing of, let's be honest, these days everyone's always trying to sneak just more flankers on the field.
Mm.
So we're kind of getting that with the player profile that she's bringing in there. So like the whole team, we haven't even talked about. Oh my gosh, this episode is too long already. But who cares? You're already here. Strap in. Um, Pivot, because obviously Hannah King's gone. We had Te Rauarua Gappa, who'd been running the tiller for us most of the way through preseason. She's obviously now, she took a pretty bad knock on Saturday. I have had conversations with her. She's feeling good, so looks like it's a concussion. She'll work through the process on that. That's going to mean, what, 3 weeks for her? So that means the door is wide open for Cassie Siatanga, who was a really interesting sign for the Poua, but I think also just like the story of women's rugby in New Zealand. Because Cassie had been ticking away in the, you know, in the traditional pipeline to try and make her way to the Black Ferns. Doors weren't opening for her, so she went sideways, right? First, in terms of playing a bit of rugby league, she's played quite a bit of rugby league for Canterbury, but also going up the road to the Tasman Mako rather than spending all that time in Canterbury trying to get on the field with their stacked backline, up the road there, linking up then with her Samoan sisters, going and representing internationally for Samoa. She's now been famous for kicking the goal at the death to win the game. Quite happy to have that in my team. Thank you very much. Bringing that in there, but also makes her way into Super Aupiki from Super W, because it wasn't necessarily from, I wouldn't say it was her season in the Mako. I think it was her season with the Manusina, and I think it was her season with Super W that has opened this door up for her. And I think that's really interesting, and is a message to like younger players that are watching now. The ladder that they've laid out for you might not be the one that you take, because there are actually multiple ladders now. And isn't that exciting? There are different places that you can go and things that are opening up for you. And so I think Cassie Siatanga is a beautiful example of that.
Absolutely. I mean, she's got experience, right, which she'll need, and probably in a team that has a bit of youth and, you know, inexperience. But, you know, that midfield combination that she has outside of her, there's not a lot that she has to do, really. You know, if she just controls that game at her pace, is able to put those girls into space, just keep directing the play, she'll be fine. Did she get much minutes after Gappa went off? Was
Yeah,
it?
and I have to say the main thing that we saw from her was the crossfield pass kick to Aish, hissed away when scored it. So give me 100 more of those this season,
Nice.
please. And we haven't necessarily had that since we had, like, as much as we, Hannah King, great territorial kicker. She didn't really utilize that kick pass. We had that the season before, probably with Victoria Sabritsky Nafatali, but now we've got it back with Cassie, and we saw them put up one, and it came off in a big way. And so that now, as I was saying to my partner afterwards, I was like, that's the dream for Aisha, because now you're going to have her opposite is going to have to make a decision. Are they going to be up on her to try and shut her down because you don't want to give that girl an inch of space, or are they going to have to drop a bit to cover that kick pass that might be coming? Like, you're creating more space, more time for an already lethal weapon. I'm so fizzy about that opportunity.
Absolutely. And when you can nail the accuracy in those cross kicks, that does things to defenders, right? Like the defense starts to really have two minds about what they do, like you've just mentioned there. So that's an exciting element to add to a pretty physical and explosive backline.
Yeah. Now, I will say though, we are on a bit of injury watch already with the Poua. I understand Shaq, she didn't play, Shakira Baker, she didn't play on the weekend. She's maybe a bit of a question mark at the moment. So we're having to pull a couple of people in because we also, like I say, Gappa went down on the weekend. That's not great for us. Rangi Mārie, she played the whole game, but she told me she was all right after, but she's still a little niggle there. So I'm like, okay, what are we doing here? Are we pulling people in? Now, we've had an interesting thing as well with that in the front row, and that we have pulled in a player on the weekend who had never played in the front row before, traditionally a 7 or 8, called in, asked to play in that front row, because we cannot call up the player we would normally call up, an established prop of our region, which is Angel Schwenke, because she is capped for Samoa, and Wellington is already, the Hurricanes are already tapped out with 2 Samoan caps. We've got Cassie, obviously, and we've got Denise in the front row. Now, all of a sudden, that international cap starts looking very much like a handbrake on rugby in my region, because we've got a crazy stat. I think it's something like just under 80% of the playing base here in Wellington are Samoan heritage, right? Huge proportion of ours. When they're not getting the opportunities to go further in New Zealand, why wouldn't they have a crack at playing international rugby? But now what are we doing? What are we doing, New Zealand rugby, when these are our New Zealand players, and you'll say, oh, but this is all about bleeding black ones. Shut up. It's about growing women's rugby. And if you look at where the men's game was in 96 when this competition launched, how many international players were in that side at that time? Because at that time, it was all pretty loosey-goose, and blokes would play for one team, one World Cup, and then for the All Blacks the following. You had people like Frank Bunks bouncing around between. We had that going on for the blokes at this time. We've shut the door firmly on women right now, when we need to be supporting everything we can to be supporting growth. So my challenge to you, New Zealand Rugby, because I know you'll be listening, you need to do one of 2 things. You need to up the cap, make a concession for international players when it comes to those that are registered within the Oceania Championship. So that'll open the door to Samoan heritage players, that'll open the door to Tongans, to Fijians, and to Aussies. I'm not mad at that. You either do that, or you sort your shit out and you invite the Panina Pacifica to come and play here. At the moment, they're playing as part of the pre-season over in Super W, so the foundation has been laid anyway for the crossover for them to be introduced, but you've got to sort it out. You've got to do something about our Pacific players, because you have taken so much, and we have built our programs, our national game off the back of a number of Pacific, sisters. So we have to be looking after them too.
100%. And I think too, like, a lot of these girls, a lot of these women have played all their rugby in New Zealand. A lot of them born and bred in New Zealand. They've given to New Zealand. And we don't have the biggest high performance program in New Zealand right now. So a lot of these women are opting to go and play for their home country, and good on them. But even when they are choosing that, they are only getting potentially a handful of games a year, if that, right? So are they getting exposure to high performance rugby is the question I'd be asking as well. And if they're not, how are we, New Zealand, how are we helping them get that? Naturally, I'd think through Super Rugby Aupiki, like make these girls, allow these girls to play, because it's going to lift not only our Super Rugby Aupiki competition, it's going to lift our Pacifica nations as well, who we also need, because right now our only real game time is against Australia, and that's probably not giving us what we need at the moment. So we need to strengthen those around us, and they in turn will strengthen us. I agree. Like, there needs to be some exemptions made for some of our women from our Pacifica regions to be able to play and not be restricted by that quota of 2 per team.
Like, you're gonna get there anyway, mate. So you may as well make the bold decision now instead of the limping along one, right? Which is what we always do. But we're gonna get there because if you look at the other examples internationally within women's rugby, the PWR is the benchmark, right, in terms of domestic competitions. That's the domestic competition that's played out of England. Now I'm pretty sure they have the 6-cap rule, which is pretty standard around most of the places. So it's you can have 6 internationals within within your sides, and that's how USA Rugby, Canada Rugby, Ireland, Wales, French players, they're all over there. They're all playing within there. And that's listing the standard for England. Yeah, okay, a couple of maybe borderline players aren't getting there, but your top team is getting even better because they're playing these players every week. So they're not having to wait to Six Nations to play the Six Nations. They play them a 10-week, 10-team competition, and then they play the Six Nations. So in terms of that, like, this is the thing within women's rugby right now. Yeah, pay gap is a big thing. Play gap is even more of a problem. We have to close that, give people more time on the grass so we can all get better.
Well, there we go. There's our challenge laid out before we delve into our fourth and final Aupiki team.
So sorry, Matatu. We spent a long time there. I knew I was going to go down a garden path. Hey, let me tell you the quick stats then on Matatu. 63% retention rate for them, which is actually the lowest they've ever had. They are a very sticky team. You could call them glue because people stick around. So 47%, so just under half of their team have had a black fern cap. That might also be they're sticking around. They're getting well supported. They're growing good there. And I think they have the highest number out of all of the franchises. 10 of their squad have played all 4 years. So that's an interesting fact there. And I think I was saying to both Amy Duplessis and to Whitney Hansen after the game on Saturday, I said, look, if there was a team that could get away with playing one preseason, it's probably you lot because there's so much continuity within that squad. Grace Brooker and Amy Duplessis have played a lot of rugby together. That Blackfern front row, Pip Love, Georgia Ponsonby, and oh my God, Amy Rule. So sorry, Amy. They've played together forever, it seems. The Bremner sisters now linked back up. There is a lot of pairings that have just I only now think of those players in sets. They hang out so much.
Absolutely. And I mean, Whitney Hansen, she's always been quite the visionary, right? She's had a dream that she's been able to see and now action for a long time. And so they're a well functioning system. They've got their development systems operating pretty well. They've got girls coming through the academies in the provincial areas, and they're turning over new players. They're growing from within, and yeah, they're sticking with some solid combinations. She's pretty loyal to some of her selections as well, retaining the amount that you've said there. So gonna be a pretty cool, I feel like they're sort of the unspoken ones at the moment. We've got the underdogs, the Poua, but I feel like Matatu have kind of been just under the radar a little bit, maybe internalizing, maybe just focusing on themselves. So it'll be quite exciting to see what they bring out next week. What did you think of them on the weekend?
Well, I thought it was really interesting, when you were using the word balance for the Blues. I think that was quite interesting in terms of, again, if we go back to the Manawa conversation around experience versus youth, I think they have a really nice balance of experience and youth. I think it's been a hand that hasn't been forced, because if you look at, for example, in the Poua, hey, we've had to bring in a lot of young ones, and that's been we've had to, right? Whereas it feels like with the Matatu, it's been more intentional. Yeah, they've had a couple of people that have moved around, but they've also got, young, exciting combinations. So the fact that you've got what was last year's Black Ferns starting 9 and 10. So Maya Joseph and Hannah King. And then outside of them, Grace Brooker, Amy Duplessis, with you've got so much experience there outside of what is actually quite experienced already for like 5 years old in terms of rugby. No disrespect to you ladies, but like they are still pretty green, but they're like have been tried and tested in these big arenas, and now they're coming back here. They're going to be tested every week. Like, let's be real, every other 9 and 10 in the country is going to be coming for them. So it's really interesting. I think they're going to be really tested, which is going to be great for them because they'll have everything thrown at them for the next few weeks.
Absolutely. I think too, even their 12-13 combination, who are probably some of their more, what would you call, stalwart players, but also your solid, consistent players, they too will be tested and matched, right? Because the 12-13 combinations across the competition, maybe actually Manawa having...
Yeah.
I think if you were to look at the Manawa midfield competition, that's probably where they maybe are a bit light, is for experienced X-Factor midfielders. But every other team, injury pending, is going to test each other in that midfield combination. I'm quite excited to see Lucy Jenkins actually get quality game time at 7. I'm assuming she's going to be there 7 now that they've lost Kendra Reynolds has gone on to play rugby overseas, and Holly Greenway has gone up to the Blues. I'm hoping that means we're going to see Lucy Jenkins get big minutes, 80 minutes, playing 7.
And what I will say is Kaipor Olsen-Baker didn't play. She had a niggle, so she didn't play over the weekend, and it was noticeable. Because one thing I will say, that if I was, saying, hey, question mark sitting over Matatu right now, who's your punch? Because Kaipor's that, and Martha Matiele was that. So at the moment, Kaipor will be back, but Martha won't be. And who is that punch? Because they were making poor Amy Duplessis be that punch for her, and she's so brave, man. Like, I'm watching her run into contact. I do not miss playing rugby at all, but like she was doing what she can, and her best is obviously once she's in offloading. But that real like line break, that's not necessarily going to be her. That was Martha. Massive meters out of her last year. You've got Caitlin who does that for the Blues. You've got Aisha that does that for Poua, but I'm not really sure. My question mark is on who does that for Matatu. Is that Holly Ray Meti? Like, she's a one that they've taken from Poua. Is that her? I'm not sure yet. It's the question that needs to be answered for me.
That's a real good point, because you think Martha was their power winger, right?
Yeah.
And you mentioned Caitlin for the Blues. Let's not forget Portia Woodman on the other side. Oh,
yeah, for goodness sake.
We got power wingers just, everywhere at the moment. Who is Matatu's power winger, or are they going with a bit more fit and fast, more versatile? I'm not too sure. So, we'll soon see what that looks like. I hope Holly Ray goes well. I mean, I know she had an outstanding FPC last year, was phenomenal in the games that I got to watch her play. She did really well, line breaks constantly, all day. I guess what I think about now is that is the second division of the FPC competition. How well does she execute that same step level that she gave in the FPC last year? How well does she do that at this level in Aupiki? So that's the ultimate test for a lot of these young girls, right, is to step into this new and higher level. And some of them, like the Eleanor Plum Kings, they absolutely just dominate, and you would think they've been there for years. I hope we sort of see that from Holly Ray as well.
I mean, that's the thing with Matatu, and what I do also want to say, I always think is interesting in terms of their style of play. Yeah, they are a team that has a lot of ticker. Like, they love beating you in the 82nd minute, which is just like Canterbury, their feeder, right? Like, they will play every single minute of every single game. But what I also think is interesting with the head coach like Whitney Hansen is, I think more so than any other team we see in the competition, she is a coach that will pick a team to play a certain other team. So she's more inclined to make changes in a lineup, paying attention to what's in front of her. And so that's going to be exciting to watch them do that again this season.
Yeah, great point. I think, and at this time she was the assistant coach, but when they won in 2023, I think that was pure coaching, like great coaching in that final to come out on top of Manawa. And again, there was a kick in there involved, but there was some great coaching at that point as well.
Okay, Holly Hecker, we have spoken to you for like an hour.
Oh my gosh, have we?
Congratulations, everyone. We could have done this for another 2. This was us being restrained. RIP to everybody and their time. I hope you had a really long drive where you were doing this one, because I think this is going to be us every week. I think the only other thing I want to say, Les, is I want to make sure to give a special shout out this week to Crystal Poua for supporting the Brazilian team to beat Australia in sevens in Vancouver. Unreal. Unheard of. Would never have predicted that. That would have paid like $1 million at the TAP. And I think that just shows you that coaching women is the best bet.
That is absolutely phenomenal. That just blew up on social media, as well as Michaela Brake becoming the overall top try scorer. So some awesome things happening in the sevens as well. But yes, we have got Aupiki in a week's time. I can't wait. Oh, I can't wait till we start picking these games apart as well and sharing to the world these amazing players.
Yeah, so stick with us. We'll be back in your ears again next week.